This is the Nomad Futurist podcast, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and transformation. Connect with us, share your thoughts with us at nomadfuturist.com. Let's get this started. Here are Phil and Nabeel. Hello. Welcome to Nomad Futurist. This is your co-host Nabeel Mahmood from Kailua Kona, Hawaii.
This is your co-host Philip Koblenz from Montclair, New Jersey.
And I'm Chris Downie from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Chris, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. This has been way overdue. I'm glad we were able to make our calendars sync. Let's start to get to know you a little bit. Could you tell us who you are, what you do, where you're at in your career?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me. It's great to have this conversation, in particular at the beginning of a new year. So happy New Year to you guys and to your listeners. So, as I said, Chris Downie, I'm currently the CEO of Flexential. I've been in the data center business now for, I think it's my 16th year. But prior to that, I had been kind of a serial CFO I'd say in the emerging technology domain, not to date myself, but I got involved with things in the cable industry, the cellular industry, the satellite industry. And, they've all been on their own journeys over the course of the last, 3 decades, I guess. So, now at Flex, it's my, I guess I'd call it my second scale adventure in the data center space. I spent 9 years at a company called Telex that, had a kind of a special place in and around the connectivity part of the data center value proposition. And Flexential is a national platform that kind of extends a whole host of capabilities to a whole host of customers, principally in the US. So I guess that's quick business background, but happy to go further if that's of interest.
We're going to peel this onion, Chris. We're going to peel it. We're going to peel it good.
Absolutely. You've got all of my attention. So BA in history and international business. How did you get from that to finance to being a technologist?
Yeah, so I guess I did get to my BA in history, which, I think I was always interested in learning from the past. And so I think I recall my senior thesis was kind of comparing the philosophies and the lives of Mao and Gandhi, who are two very different leaders that are, you don't
usually hear Mao and Gandhi used in the same sentence. I think you might give you a doctorate in history if you can tie those two together.
Yeah, I wish I still had that thesis paper because the brain cells are long gone. But anyway, learning from past experiences, I think, has always been something that has resonated with me. But really came out of college more a desire to learn and learn from new experiences. And so my first work experience was I was an investment banker on Wall Street and did, the obligatory 2-year boot camp at Bear Stearns, which existed then, does not exist now. But as I began to focus on industries, I really knew 2 things coming out of college, that I like to, communicate with people and I like to be entertained. And so as I thought about, industries that would be staying in resilient over the longer term, those were 2 areas. And I think that, got me closer to, to the communication landscape, which ultimately, led to the internet, which ultimately has a whole host of technologies that support it. So kind of, through that investment banking career, got closer to those industries and then, started raising private equity and debt capital for emerging technologies, like I mentioned earlier, like cellular, which was in its infancy when I came out of college, and things that, weren't even thinking about the internet yet, and just figuring out how to more leverage, wireless communications technologies. And that ultimately, led me to the data center sector where I am today.
Would the young Chris Downie be surprised that this Chris Downie is so tied to technology? Did you enjoy technology as a child, in your formative years?
I guess in my formative years, I'd say there wasn't a lot of technology.
Horse and buggy whips. I mean, technology of the day. It's all about context.
I think I did have one of the first Atari game stations where I think it was Pong and and bricks or something that you played.
I can feel our listeners like we like a Wikipediaing what an Atari is.
Exactly. But, I guess I think that the younger Chris Downie probably would be surprised in that, I didn't kind of go through my educational experience to focus, on one specific area. It was more of a, kind of a liberal arts, education. And for that to have settled in where I find myself today, I think wasn't in the cards, but, I think a lot of things led me to where I am today.
Were your parents in finance? Is that how you had your kind of trajectory to that? Was that in the background?
My father was kind of in corporate finance. I think he actually did kind of real estate development for Denny's for a while, if you can believe that, which was fast growing global enterprise. And he also worked for Grace, which was an investment bank then. So there was, I guess, something in my DNA there. And my mother was, effectively a legal secretary at law firms in New York, Paul Weiss and Devin Plimpton. And so there was this, and I kind of grew up in the New York area. So there was this gravitational pull around finance. And so that kind of kicked me off in my first foray in investment banking, which was about a 10-year experience. So I did a lot in that domain a while ago.
How is this migration from finance to getting into being a technologist and talking bits and bytes and all the technical elements of what we do? How was that transition for you, and what was the switch over?
Yeah, so I guess I probably, while I was an investment banker, thought I was going to be an investment banker for the rest of time. But there was a kind of a serial entrepreneur that starting up a competitive local exchange carrier, a CLEC, as you may be familiar with the acronym, and this was in the 2000 timeframe, and I helped him build, the business plan and business model that was sort of the business that I was in, and helping people raise capital around that business plan, that business model. And as we're going through that exercise, and I was a whopping probably 30 years of age at that juncture, he asked if I wanted to be the CFO. And I said, I don't know how to do that. And he said, you're smart, you'll figure it out. So I think in some regards I was fortunate and lucky. The luck plays a role probably in just about everything in life, but I was lucky to have, what became an important mentor to me that, had faith that I was going to figure it. And it wasn't just being a CFO, but it was about the whole, operating domain, working, as part of a team to, accomplish a certain mission, around, at that time, obviously it was communications technology, but there was certainly a lot for me to learn because, investment bankers really knew nothing about how to operate a business and manage people. And so that was kind of how I jumped into the transition, if you will.
I think the interesting thing always about going from, a large bureaucratic organization like a Bear Stearns into that entrepreneurial mindset, even as a CFO who, as part of a large company is, someone that is focused entirely on numbers, but as part of a small company, it doesn't matter what your title is, right? Chief bottle washer, right? You get exposed to all different types of operational elements. What was that transition like? The transition of, large institutional type of company like a Bear Stearns to even with a big title that might have, overshot what your skill set was at that time, to a smaller organization where you have to dip your hands in different pots, if you will.
Yeah. And, looking back on it, I'd say it was quite scary, while the CEO I mentioned had a lot of faith in me. I didn't know if I was going to be able to, I had no idea what I was getting myself into in terms of, I knew what the business model was. I knew what the spreadsheet said, but, I didn't know the people. I hadn't managed anybody in my life. And so I kind of walked in with, just like a blank stare, if you will, and just had to, let kind of good decision-making be my guide, if you will. What was logical or practical or both, in a given situation, and work through things accordingly. But I joked with my wife a couple of months ago around just this topic because I literally was trying to find a book, the kind of CFO for dummies. How do you be a CFO? for anybody that's searching for it, I don't think that book exists, but maybe it does now because that was some time ago. But, I literally came in with, that book under whatever book I found under one arm, but I didn't even know how to balance, I knew how to balance a checkbook, but I didn't know how it was done in the corporate world. And so I actually got physical checks and went to the bank and was trying to figure that out on my own. And thankfully that same CEO said, a few weeks into it, he's like, when are you going to hire a controller? And I was like, oh, I have the luxury of hiring a controller. I didn't appreciate that. And so, ultimately was able to, really partner up with somebody that, obviously reported to me, but ultimately kind of, knew the things that I didn't know. And I was more than happy to check my ego at the door and, kind of learn how I could be the most effective CFO given the skill sets that I did have, because that controller didn't necessarily know how to raise capital and how to approach different investors for different opportunities. And that was really the skill set that I had developed over that decade, if you will.
So how would you summarize?
Just one thing. I'm sorry. How much of what you learned in college applied to that moment? Like you come out of college, you think you have this skill set, right? And I'm not trying to convince people not to go to college. It's just a question of whether, is it the personality that drove that? Is it you as a person that drove your ability to navigate that? Or was it, a particular skill that you learned, with a degree? And obviously it's a leading question because I kind of know the answer to it, but.
I mean, I guess I kind of touched on it beforehand. I think it was, the kind of the desire to learn in different circumstances, versus being trained in one specific thing. I went to Dartmouth College, which is a liberal arts college, and you were sort of, I think you came out of college trained how to learn and kind of takes your general learning and adapt it to different situations. So there wasn't anything specific, accounting or engineering that necessarily prepared me for that. I think it was just, kind of recognizing that there's, a whole range of perspectives in any given situation that need to be considered and having, an open mind, to kind of learn those perspectives and adapt them to given situations.
Now you're in a CEO role. What do you think are some of your traits that have led you to where you're at today and your strengths?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of, first of all, I'd say over, the 20-year career, 25-year career in industry that I've had, I've had some really rough experiences and some good experiences and, appreciating that neither the rough ones or the good ones, were guaranteed. The things ebb and flow and timing is a major consideration, that can lead to success or failure. So making sure that I appreciated, those learnings along the way, that CLEC experience I referenced before, I had about a 2.5 year life before the telecom meltdown, kind of blew it up and probably 100 other, if not 1,000 other companies. And, I saw a company that I'd, poured a lot of energy into evaporate, really over the course of two months, where, 200 people were let go before Christmas. And that was, I view that as one of a great learning for me, in that, things, well, you kind of think you spend a lot of money on things and that is sustainable in and of itself, but it can be eviscerated, almost instantaneously based on either bad events or bad decisions or what have you. So, making sure that in each one of my, adventures, if you will, of course of my career, there were takeaways, and I'd say I use all those, takeaways in what, what I'm doing today at Flexential. I've been fortunate to be in this industry now for over 15 years. And so while data centers existed before, I got into the industry in 2007, I'd say the whole investment, kind of thesis in the industry, I like to think the industry sort of grew up as I grew up within it. So I'd like to think I kind of have learned more than most, or as much as many, I guess maybe I could also say, in the industry. So, but I pride myself in my integrity, and, and it's integrity, not just about character and really following through on what you commit to, but the integrity of decision making, the integrity of relationships, and I hope that has resonated with those that I've dealt with, because I think integrity speaks volumes. Every individual or every company is going to be faced with things it's never seen before, and it's really kind of leveraging that kind of the integrity that you built up over time to tackle many challenges. That's been kind of core part of Chris Downie, if you will.
So one thing I'm struck by, and I've always been struck by you, is the kind of accessibility that you have as a CEO in your level. I mean, I think it's difficult to state it just by reading off a resume. I mean, you're one of the rare people in our industry that is a legend, not just in their own head. I am a legend in my own head only. You are an actual legend. You go from telex to a just tiny transaction with DRT. I don't know what the number was, but it's pocket change at this point. And you take that to Flexential, and I think most people would think that if you had those giant type of transactions in your career, that it would impact you in a way where you wouldn't put yourself out there. You wouldn't just be as accessible at events at any of these things as you have always been. And that's something that I think your employees probably appreciate, that you're there, you're in it with them. How much of that kind of camaraderie has been, a kind of case in point of maybe your brand of leadership that might be unique to what some other people, like when did you ever see the CEO of Bear Stearns? Probably not often enough in your role.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And, I think that it's been important for me to, I guess, I mentioned earlier that, kind of the check your ego at the door, because, I know in almost every situation, there's somebody that's done it better than me, or has done it bigger than me, or knows, potentially how to do it better than me in a given circumstance. So, kind of coming into situations and meeting, anybody, whether it's in the company or in the industry, and presuming simply because I've been fortunate enough to have a good event that I'm somehow, in a different class than that individual or that employee, I think is, quite frankly, foolish. And so, you probably have seen from some of my kind of LinkedIn missives and stuff that I'm a bit of a rugby nut. And, I played in college, and I think what I loved about that sport was, it was obviously, kill the person with the ball sport, which I probably loved it since I was a little kid. But, there's an ethos there of teamwork and strategy, and every player having a position on the field that's critical to the team's success. And I've leveraged that ethos at Flex in particular, where, and there's simple mantras that I've used. One that I currently focus on is really side by side, and that, there's nobody in the company that's more important than anybody else. And so I don't know how to do your job, and you don't know necessarily how to do my job. The only way that we're successful as a team is if we both play our, respective positions. And that could be an AP clerk to a CEO, to a salesperson, to our chief innovation officer, or what have you. And so, I've tried to, kind of always kind of keep that in mind, as I'm engaging with anybody in the company or outside the company, because I certainly, I've had my experiences, and some of them have been quite good, but that doesn't necessarily, give me the right to be dismissive or not recognize that there's perspectives that I could continue to learn.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that you addressed earlier and talked about was leave your ego behind. Yeah. And be respectful and empathetic to people. I think that's really, for the amount of time I've known you, I think that's really what makes you unique. Unfortunately, once people end up having massive cash outs, or they get to a certain level in their career, their egos get bigger than who they really are, and they start to disconnect from the general populace. So thank you for being you.
We could all just be like a little Chris Downie.
Exactly. Plus, your flexing goes really well with Flexential. I mean, that's
perfect. That's the rugby thing works. Look at this. Look at those guns. Oh my God.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about tech. Where do you think we are headed? There's a lot of crazy stuff that's happening around. We've got a lot of initiatives. The biggest challenge that we've got right now in the space is carbon neutrality. Everybody's talking about it. Where do you think we are headed with it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think things are very, very, and this perhaps to state the obvious, very different now than when I came into the industry in 2007. The raw materials that tech relies on were, in abundance. And I think, just given the incredible growth of tech and the raw materials that it consumes, that, that the landscape is changing in terms of how you need to think about, future growth and, raw materials or land, power, network, people. And so, I guess my point is kind of looking back to then, I'm thinking about very, very different things now, on the kind of the sustainability front and, ESG in general. I think it's great to have seen that come into the front windshield, if you will, of the industry and of us, as leaders and executives, because we're in a position to do something about it. I don't think there's anything I can do that's necessarily going to change the outcome materially, but I, can make commitments to play my part, with the resources and the decision making that's available to me. And I've been, happy to be able to do that because it's important to me as a person, to me as a, father with a daughter that has to, kind of live in whatever world we leave our kids, and, and as a steward of, an employee base that worked hard to keep, to live up to those commitments. So it's been, as it relates to the whole ESG front, I've been happy to and appreciative to be able to play a role in that, if you will.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time. One of the unique elements of our industry versus, say, the finance industry or the legal industry is sustainability and power costs are such a core component of our cost structure in the data center world. We use so much power in the data center world that, yes, of course, there's no question that, you want to make sure that you're benefiting future generations and, a clean earth and everything. But just from a financial perspective, it makes sense. It can't be performant on its face in our industry, because the future of our cost structures, the margins and all that are significantly, benefited by maximizing efficiency. So, the better you design these sites, the more efficiently they run, so we have the unique industry where valuations and margins kind of align with ESG more than most. And I think the reason I mention that point so much is because I think that in and of itself could potentially be a draw to the younger generation, who's obviously focused so much on the environment and ESG, and to know that as an industry, we are not just saying words like they are in other industries where they're buying carbon offsets and doing all sorts of other performative elements. We actually want to build a more efficient ecosystem, whether that means, taking some of the heat that's generated in the data centers and using it to power homes and communities, or trying to, leverage renewable energy in a way that makes us more self-sustaining and sets our industry up for the future.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. When I talk about, or when I get this question, one of the things that I make sure I say before kind of get into what we're doing now is that I think we've been in the, kind of in the efficiency business as it relates to power, the whole time the industry's been here. I think relative to, the alternatives of, legacy enterprise class data centers, that, or telco closets that are in the corner of a building that, are not using their power efficiently at all relative to the PUEs that we've been managing for a decade. So, we've been, that is a key, raw material of ours, and it leads to better margins if we leverage it efficiently. And so we've been very efficient with it to date. Can we be even better? Yes. And I think that's what we're certainly focused on today as well. And, I also, a lot of, the data center business exists today because a lot of things that historically, were in a physical form are now in the digital form, and they need to live somewhere, and they live in data centers, and power is necessary to
ourselves included. I mean, we used to have to physically be in the same room to have one of these conversations, and we no longer have to.
But I think the industry's, now getting a bit of a bad rap because we're, such large, power owners, but that power is necessary to house, the digital information, the digital applications that everybody, lives and breathes and exists with. And so you have to be careful to make sure you appreciate and understand what you're criticizing, because, I think this industry, data centers exist for a reason. They exist for a very good reason. Can we be better? Yes. But, let's not lose sight of the fact that, a lot of things that used to be in the physical domain that we rely on are now relied upon in the work domain.
Yeah. And I think that's, that's part of the demystification, right? I mean, I think people look at data centers as though they just sprung up and it's just another one of those things that are using power, when in reality, it's just aggregating all of the power that we would have had in all these, different sections that you don't have the ability to control in the same way that we are, have a fiduciary responsibility to control beyond just, our responsibility as citizens of the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I think the industry has grown probably bigger and faster than anybody even contemplated. So, that is creating probably a disproportionate bias to how, that raw material power is being consumed relative to what else it needs to be consumed.
Just stop hosting all those Bitcoin miners, Chris, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's the FTX. I think that's going to solve itself out. So I think, Chris, we are actually a very unique time right now with all this innovation and fun technology with autonomous vehicles and AI coming into our lives. What are some of the technology stacks or platforms that you're looking at for the very near future?
Well, one of the things I've said to people is that, certainly the technological advancement that has driven the growth in the data center industry has been, amazing. The data center itself hasn't evolved from a technology perspective, from a physical perspective in terms of the generators, the switch gear, the floors, the walls, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of pretty much the same as today as it was a decade ago. Yes, it's probably, it's improved upon its efficiencies and in that infrastructure, and it's certainly bigger. But, there haven't been, kind of these, game-changing technologies on the physical side in our industry. We provide some, I'd say, some more virtualized compute resources to our customers, because, I think that's just a natural evolution of what the data center needs to enable, for its customers. But, I think making sure that they have access to in an automated fashion to the latest and greatest technologies that are out there. We're not, innovating new compute. We're probably innovating ways for them to gain access to those resources.
You're innovating ways for them to consume the stuff that you're selling.
Yes. So, I kind of don't think that innovation for us is about innovation and creative ways to enable. It's not about creating, new technologies. It's more about new ways of doing things than new technologies, if you will.
One of the things that we see all the time, we talk about, and it's one of the missions of our, Nomad Futurist Foundation, is trying to get, the next generation of leaders into our industry. And we always talk about the fact that, we have an industry that has tons of subverticals, whether you're a technologist or you don't have to be like a computer guy necessarily to enter, the critical infrastructure or data center industry. There's marketing, there's business, there's all legal, there's a ton of ways that you can participate and actually see the fruits of your labor acutely in a way that you can't with many other industries. Do you see that as an issue? I mean, look, we've been at the same events together for the last, you've been in this thing for 16 years, probably 15 years and 9 months. We've been going to the same industry events. I have aged a lot less gracefully than you have, clearly, as anyone can tell that looks at the top of my head. But, the question really is have we as an industry done enough to try to foster the next generation of leaders, not just the data center technicians, working on the floor, which are obviously a human resource that we're in desperate need of, but the leadership of our organizations as we try to, pave the pathway for Chris Downie to one day retire.
I as you were asking the question, I was thinking that there's a lot of, when I'm talking to people in the industry, everybody knows what a data center is, what it does and why. But when I talk to anybody outside the industry, you get a bit of a blank stare as to what is a data center? Although it enables these things that we can't see,
right?
These phones or a small laptop that happens to allow you to make calls on it. But, you get a blank stare because nobody knows, what it is and how this stuff works and where information, lives while it's not being used. And so I think there's a lot more education that can be done for people to recognize that, they can participate in what we do in our industry because they're not thinking about it. They'll probably see what an Amazon is doing or what a Google is doing simply because they're such massive, marketing machines. But in terms of
but even then, the regular person on the street, if you ask them what Amazon is doing, they'll just say, it's, that's where I buy my groceries or where I buy my stuff, my batteries, my books, what it was like books anymore. But all my, it's who I yell at to go play music in my kitchen. So, I hear you. And I think obviously it's our core mission, but I wonder if there's a way for us just to create an educated consumer. I mean, you see it in your house, or I'm still like the CTO of my family, right? I'll have my sister and calling me and say, what laptop should I buy? Or, something's wrong with my computer. I don't know what to do. And at the end of the day, everyone is running kind of a mini data center in their house, and connectivity is so important. But when it goes out, if your Verizon Fios connection goes out, everyone they just start banging on the computer or banging on the laptop. My wife does it to this day. Yep. She'll just start like hitting the keyboard harder to see if that will make it work. And it's like, if for no other reason than to create just a better consumer, people that are capable of troubleshooting or critical thinking in their own, based on the technologies that are so important. And I think we need to get to them obviously younger and younger and make it part of like a real kind of a core education platform as we make technology work.
Yeah, we've had some experiences over the last couple of years at Flexential, and one being, we've got a big presence in Denver. So the dean of the Denver Business School, the Daniels School of Business, I'm probably going to get the name of the program wrong. I think it's like a digital innovation curriculum within the business school, really to build, strength and awareness of understanding of what we're talking about here. And so, that doesn't exist today. Well, I'd say that was my first experience where, that was a focus area. It might exist in certain other areas, but I think that I saw as a great opportunity for those that participate in the curriculum, but for us to engage with that and kind of help people kind of understand how this all works and where we fit in. And because it's a huge part of, where the proverbial puck is going. So
exactly. Well, that's a perfect segue in breaking this out that Nomad Futurist is going to be launching its online academy by the end of the quarter.
Oh, awesome.
I even think that is a little old. Like, we're trying to target like people right now, especially during the pandemic. My kids, I have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old. They were all online during the pandemic. They all know how Google Classroom works. They know how Zoom works in many cases better than most adults. So they understand how technology works. They don't understand why technology works because it's just not part of, their education. So, that's our goal is to try to increase that for sure.
With everything that's happening in the space, with diversity and inclusion being at the forefront, education and human capital deficit being a concern as we progress, and technology becoming second nature and muscle memory for everybody, and more of devices and people being connected, what would you suggest the younger generation to look into based on your experiences? What's next?
Well, I mean, I guess I'd encourage people to ask questions and recognize there's a lot to learn. When you asked your question there, you talked about 8 or 10 different things that all play a part in being a successful leader or a successful participant in whatever role you're playing. So kind of check your ego at the door and understand that there's you're never going to know everything, and so there's something to learn from everyone. And you mentioned diversity and inclusion. I mean, that it's been a fantastic topic, but that it really, came into the light in the course of the last, 3 years. And thankfully so. But, that's an area where, one of the things on the kind of the diversity front that I learned more about, and it was an aha moment for me, was about unconscious bias. We've been brought up a certain way, and I don't want to say we were trained a certain way, but we think how we, sort of grew up, and we need to sort of recognize that we have these unconscious biases that we need to, recognize and kind of put in their place and make sure that we're, keeping an open mind and learning. And I think, that obviously is around, diversity, but I think every part of your question is about, keeping an open mind and appreciating different perspectives and not assuming, based on ego that your way is absolutely the right way. There's probably a better way that you need at least to consider. So,
and again, one of the things that from a D&I standpoint, I think the conversation is similar to ESG and other things. It's always traditionally been a checkbox. But if you can reframe it as, in order to continue to evolve products that are meaningful to a broader, set group of people, you need to have people at the table whose lived experience inform, how they leverage those products. People are products of their environments, right? So inevitably, you're just not going to have the knowledge. Yes, I mean, the self-awareness of recognizing that we all have our own unconscious biases because that's just a product of how we were raised and our environment. But inevitably, we need people from different areas of the globe, different socioeconomic backgrounds that leverage technology, leverage things that live in our data centers in ways that we couldn't possibly contemplate.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Chris, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. This has been absolutely phenomenal. Great having you. And I look forward to seeing you soon one of these days.
No, thank you for letting me share some thoughts, and look forward to seeing you guys in person soon.
This has been great. Nothing lasts forever. Markets will come back, currencies will rebound, businesses will go on, and we'll all move on. That could happen next week, next month, or next year. I'm confident that those who prepare rather than panic will come out of this stronger. Thank you for joining us. This has been brought to you by Nomad Futurist. Check us online at nomadfuturist.com.